Well, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Photography Schoolhouse and tonight's beginning of our 10-part series on getting started in pro weddings. This is a new webinar format for us. We're doing a different technology, a different software than we've used in the past. And I'd like to know the names of those who are with us tonight. So if you've landed on the Photography Schoolhouse watch page, you'll see a Photography Schoolhouse chat window. So why don't you go ahead, type your name in there so I know who all I'm talking to tonight. Just your first name is fine. Hello, guest 212. But I don't have a name. Keith. I had a feeling it was Keith because you always seem to come in as guest 212. I don't know why that is. Shows here as guest 212. Okay, so remember, I'm going to go ahead with the presentation. Remember, I'm wanting you, if you just logged in, I see some people just logged in the chat window, just introduce yourself. Just give me your first name so I know who's we're talking with tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and start talking about wedding photography. No, Keith, I'm not really sure why it does that. I thought if you logged in, it would just keep your name, but I don't know. I'll have to look into that later. So I'm presuming that most of our audience tonight is new at coming into wedding photography. They've been thinking about it or they've started to dabble with it. The presentation is based on the idea of somebody new. So in the beginning, we may cover off some points that you're already familiar with, but bear with us. I'm sure we're going to get into some tips and advice that you can make use of. To give you an idea of how this presentation is going to go, we have to talk about a lot of different subjects in wedding photography, not the least of which is some sort of a business strategy. You can't just print up a business card, say, hey, I'm a wedding photographer, and expect that that's really going to work out for you. It just won't. So we're going to talk about how do you get into the business. Photographic technique, obviously, is pretty darn important to the whole thing. How do you market in today's world? And developing the right attitude. And you'd be surprised at why I would have to say this, but I've seen some pretty funny attitudes of wedding photographers and what they think the business is all about. And some of them lean towards the prima donna end of things. Some of them just are so far out on left field that you don't really know what they're thinking. Now, you're going to find out that I'm going to be pretty honest, and sometimes it's going to sound brutal, but you know, sometimes that's what's needed. It's important also getting into this business to manage your expectations and the expectations of your clients. How do you become a professional, and how do you create that atmosphere around you? How do you develop contracts and paperwork for success? How do you protect yourself against, in cases of legal problems? How do you, once you've shot the wedding, how do you do post-production? How do you package it? How do you deliver it? How do you follow up after the fact? And most importantly, creating a customer for life. These are some of the important topics we're going to be talking about. Now, here's the layout of the program. This is a 10-part series. So part number 1, what we're doing tonight, is the introduction. We're going to talk about being a professional. We're going to talk about gearing up, what kind of equipment you would want. And I'm not really talking about brands here. I'm talking about concepts. Next week, we're going to talk about the all-important aspect of getting sample images if you're just getting started in this business. If you haven't shot weddings, in order to sell weddings, you have to show weddings. In order to show weddings, you have to have shot them. But if you haven't shot them, what do you do? How do you get experience? What about a website? Creating social media. How much should you put into it? How much should you show? Bridal shows and fairs. Should you attend? What's the benefits, the upsides, downsides? How should you be pricing your work? Selling your first job, shooting the job, and then workflow and delivery. That's the basic concepts behind those 10 steps. I do encourage questions. That's why we have a chat window here. I want you all to jump in. I know there's a lot more people here tonight than people who have given their first name. So again, hop on the chat window and type your first name in so I know who you all are. So this is really a workshop. It's not just that I want to pontificate about wedding photography or wedding experience that I run into. I want it to be an interactive process. I know some of you are already in the business. I know that you're shooting some work. What are your experiences? And by all means, we use this chat window to exchange ideas or make your comments. Totally happy to read them and see them. There will be homework assignments. We presume you're, or at least I presume, you're serious about doing this. This isn't something you're just twiddling your thumbs about. So there's going to be homework. And the idea is you should participate. You should do the homework. You should submit samples. And by all means, ask questions along the way. So we're going to develop our overall plan, understanding of the business and what it takes to do it in today's marketplace. Analyze whatever your specific equipment is. So if you want to talk about what kind of cameras you have, and again, I'm not really concerned about brands, what kind of lenses you have, what you want to be pro and to be reliable in this business. How to improve your imagery. Your website, which is an all-important part of doing the wedding business. And as I mentioned before, we're going to really get into social marketing and bridal shows in a big way. So just a quick review, the wedding industry over the years has changed a lot. I don't think anybody has any doubts about that. The deal today, what is the new style portrait studio? What are the changing skill sets and different approaches we need to be a pro? What is the business really like? Well, I'll tell you, the business is harder than it's ever been, and as far as I can see. And the people that I talk to and the experience that I have, it is a tough business right now. And many photographers who I've respected over the years have told me candidly what a hard time they're having. And here's what I believe the deal with that is. The deal with it is, as good as those photographers were, they haven't changed with the times. They haven't kept pace with what customer expectations are. Now, does that mean that every Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes to you and says, hey, I want all the digital files and I want everything you do and I want you to spend 15 hours at my wedding and I want you not to eat anything and I want everything delivered to me that night, and I only want to pay you a couple $100. Those aren't customers. Those are dreamers. So we need to learn how to find the real customers and what it is we need to do to get those customers. Customers are everything. Customers are our lifeline. Obviously, it goes without saying. I put this bullet point in here: look like, walk like, behave like a pro, just without the attitude. And the reason I put that in is that it surprises me how many photographers have attitude, that they're better than their customers, that they know more, and they may, certainly in photography, they should know more, and that's why you were hired. But is it really, it's not just about knowing more, it's about better than. It's just a pretty funny kind of an arrogance that some photographers have that just isn't going to go well. In case you're wondering, I'm advising against it. So what kind of work should we be doing? The old film versus DSLR versus mirrorless versus medium format digital cameras. Well, film should be at this point kind of a dead issue, but while DSLRs have ruled the roost for many years, we're starting to see a real influence of mirrorless and really good quality mirrorless cameras. Sony is really taking a big step forward in this area. Medium format digital cameras are still around, and they are still used. They're very expensive. Are they called for in wedding photography? And I suppose I would get a debate over this, but my belief is no. Absolutely not. You don't need to have a medium format digital camera. If you can afford it, go for it. But that's not what it's all about. For my money, DSLR is where I want to be, where I will continue to stay. It has the most flexibility. While mirrorless is coming on strong, DSLRs still have the most flexibility, the most variety of lenses, the most adaptability in terms of being able to cover different kinds of shots. So whether you go with a Nikon or a Canon, whatever, I really don't care about brands. In my opinion, they're all pretty darn good. Nikon and Canon are probably the two in the DSLR field. Sony is coming on strong in the mirrorless field. Of course, Hasselblad and Pentax are in the medium format digital. Olympus is in there. So let's not worry about brands. Let's just talk about the equipment, the features that we need to get the job done. And one of the big things is full frame advantages. When I shoot weddings, and I still shoot a little. I don't shoot like I used to. I'm over 60 years old now, so I'm allowed to take my my foot off the gas a little bit. But I have always believed that a fully equipped photographer would have both some full frame cameras and notice that's plural, and what are typically called APS-C sensors. In other words, sub full frame sensors. And each of them has a particularly useful purpose. So, for instance, typical configuration for me is to hang 3 cameras around my equipment, around my neck, all at the same time. I would normally have my full frame camera, which has varied over the years, 5D Mark II. I haven't gone to the Mark III yet after all this time. I'm still 5D Mark II, although I also have a 6D now, which is also a full frame camera. I would have my 24-70 lens on that, f2.8, and then I would have 2 APS-C sensor cameras. One of them would have my 70-200 f2.8, and the other would have my ultra wide angle. And I have had a variety of wide angles over the years, but the APS-C format, at least in Canon and Nikon, with the two that I'm most familiar with, and have the special lenses. In Canon, they call it the EFS line of lenses, which means you can get ultra wide angle without having to pay thousands and thousands of dollars. So that's kind of a cool feature. So I would have my ultra wide on one APS-C camera. I would have my 70-200 on the other. Why would I do that? Because my 200 millimeter lens now becomes a 300 millimeter f2.8 lens. So I get obscenely good telephoto images with a very fast lens that I couldn't afford to do in real life, because a 300 millimeter f2.8 lens would weigh way too much to carry around and be way too expensive for most photographers to afford. So I really like the idea that I can have 300 millimeters at f2.8 with an APS-C sensor. But yet I get the advantages of a full frame camera with my 5D Mark II and a 24-70 lens. So the advantages of full frame are not just about the resolution. The advantages of full frame are more about depth of field, bokeh, it's such a good quality image, and I just can't see doing without it. Even on location where you think full frame doesn't matter, because I've always been a big deal. I've always believed that in the studio you have to be full frame. Being APS-C in the studio is just nothing but a pain in the neck. But out on location, still full frame camera. And I would carry, literally, I look like a tourist. I'd be 3 cameras around my neck. My back would hurt like crazy at the end of the day, but that's the way I like to shoot. And I never have to stop and change lenses. I shoot a lot in Arizona. Arizona equals dust. So every time I change lenses, I get dust on the sensor. So I never change lenses. I've got 3 camera bodies, 3 lenses that get me through the entire day. Except one. I do one lens change at the reception. More on that later on. So with that kind of equipment, I can cover everything I need to do, including dealing with malfunctions. Camera goes down, it's okay. Got a couple more cameras to go yet. And I have had failures on the job. So that's all part of the game, is being able to react to problems as they happen. We've broken cameras. I've had a shutter go out. We physically damaged cameras by banging them into things or breaking the hot shoe off or doing something stupid. It will happen. If you spend any amount of time in this business, you're going to have problems. And you, as a professional, you need to be able to deal with it instantly. Not say, hey, I got to drive home and get my other camera. You've got to just reach into your trunk or your camera bag and pull out another camera. So, okay. If you're not familiar with bokeh, I just added this slide in. Bokeh is the out of focus blur in background elements. So here we focused on a thumbnail, and you can see that the flowers and leaves and everything in the background are beautifully out of focus, making this wonderful background. And yeah, that's better with a full frame camera than it is with an APS-C camera. It's also a function of the lens. The faster the lens, the better the bokeh. So artistically, this is kind of a must. Now, don't really want to get into lessons in the basics of photography, but you should, if you're going to be in the wedding photography business, you better know what it is to use your camera on manual. And if you don't, you need to go take another class somewhere. You need to know about apertures. You need to know exactly what they are and how to use them. It's not just that there's too much sunlight, I better use a smaller aperture, or I want good bokeh, I better use a big aperture. Um, you really have to understand why you have decided to select a certain aperture. That's more to the point. Anybody can do the math, but it's more to the point of the why. So you should also know the full f-stops. Just like a musician knows scales inside out and backwards and practices them for years and years of their life. So a photographer should know the full f-stops, at least the full ones. Maybe not the half or the third f-stops, but the full f-stops. You should be able to recite them from f1.2 to f64 and back again in your sleep with your eyes closed while playing a tune on your guitar. Image stabilization, I should add, on my 70 to 200, I shoot Canon, and I do use the 70 to 200 f2.8 image stabilized lens. Beautiful lens, my favorite lens of all time. Had an older one, got rid of it, because with the higher resolution cameras now, all your old glass, and that's a point worth making if you're not familiar with it. When all of these higher resolution cameras started coming out, the camera sensors outperformed the quality of the lens. So camera manufacturers have had to basically discontinue their old designs, come out with all new designs, might be the same lens, still a 70 to 200 f2.8, but it's now designed for higher resolution cameras. The optics are finer than they were before. I shoot Canon, so I'm aware that Canon has a site, has a page that you can go to check what lenses have already been replaced with the new generation lenses. I'm pretty sure Nikon's going to have the same thing. But this is, pardon me, this is important in with today's newer cameras. Quality glass. I seem to have had this debate my entire life. Everybody wants to economize. Nobody's got a pile of money sitting around just burning a hole in their pocket. So they want to buy the cheapest things that they can. And I understand that. I just would like to discourage it whenever you possibly can. Pro level glass usually is ED glass, which is extra dispersion. It's better focusing at all wavelengths of light and avoids color fringing. So in the graphic, you can see that normal glass, regular or cheap glass, if you want to put it that way, doesn't really focus all wavelengths of light at the same point. So if you focus on one wavelength, then you're going to get color fringing with all the other wavelengths. And you can really see this if you take an inferior quality photograph or a photograph from an inferior quality lens and blow it up. You'll see color fringing around the edges of all the objects. Professional glass or ED glass is designed to focus all wavelengths of light at the very same point. Cleaner, sharper, crisper, better in every measurable way. And I am therefore a fan of quality glass, the best glass you can afford. I can tell you that in the early 2000s, when I first went DSLR from my film days, I invested in a set of lenses which lasted probably 12 years. I went through numerous camera bodies. The camera bodies were practically disposable, but the glass lived forever. So if your choice, if you have a limited budget and you've got to make a wise investment, put more money into glass than you put into camera body. Because the camera bodies, you know, the shutters are going to break eventually. New designs, new improvements will come out, new features will come out that you're going to want. You're going to change camera bodies all the time, but if a good investment in glass will last probably most of your shooting career. Another argument you quite often hear, prime lenses or zoom lenses. Now, in the past, zoom lenses have taken quite a knock. Prime lenses were always better. I don't believe that, while it technically still may be true, I believe that manufacturers have put a lot of improvements into their zoom lenses. And I don't want to get into in-depth discussions about it. I think they are better than they used to be, and there are probably some prime lenses that are still a touch better from a technical standpoint. But every time I shoot, every time I do a job, in fact, it just happened to me the other day on Saturday, I was shooting, and I just was thinking as I was working how great it was that I had these high quality zoom lenses that I could adapt to the exact composition I wanted on the fly. I didn't have to move myself in or out. I didn't have to move my subjects back or forth. I didn't have to stop the shoot and reach in my camera bag for a different lens. I could just react on the fly to get the exact composition that I wanted. And this is a powerful feature in weddings when you don't have time. You're under the gun. Things are happening in a blink. And if you can't keep up with the action, you're going to miss the shot each and every time. So, yeah, good quality zoom lenses for wedding photography, absolutely the way to be. You want to be prime lens centered or based, then portrait photography is probably a better place for that. So prime lenses also maintain a constant aperture, which is one thing I really like. Although in the Canon series, at least, they're the quality lenses. Like Nikon's probably the same. I'm just not as familiar. They're also constant aperture across the entire focal length. So what I mean by that, in the bullet point, it says, for instance, a 24-70 lens might have an aperture range of f4 to 5.6. If you're shooting manual, which I often do, then you got to compensate your exposure for every time you zoom in or zoom out, and that's kind of a pain. So the more advanced zoom lenses have a static aperture regardless of the focal length that you choose. And again, it contributes to speed, quality of your exposures, just an all-around great thing. So prime lenses are often faster, I should point out, as the bullet says. Prime lenses are often faster than a zoom lens due to the construction, which means that if you do need to get down to an f1.2 or an f2 or something like that, then yeah, you probably got to go prime. One of the popular lens formats, an 85 1.2 in Canon or Nikon, very, very popular lenses, awesome lenses, expensive lenses, but where the heck else are you going to get an f1.2? Sweet spot of the lens, 2 stops down from wide open. That used to be the truth, used to be kind of engraved in stone, not so much anymore, but still a good handle. So if you've got an f4 lens and the sweet spot, in other words, its best quality is 2 stops down, well, your best quality is f8, and that doesn't always work in some lighting cases. Maybe in a studio where you've got control over constant light from your flash, then that's fine. But in most cases, shooting a wedding particularly, you're going to be in low light rooms, either a church or synagogue or a reception hall or something that just doesn't have very much light. And you're going to really appreciate good lens quality at wider apertures. I was just reading Keith's message about constant aperture f2.8 zooms that are great. Heavier than prime, 1.4 is great, but not required. Yeah. So again, I heavily believe in zoom lenses with one or two exceptions. I do carry, and it's here's something that have used at receptions for years and years and years, and it's one of the cheapest lenses Canon makes. It's like an f1.8 50 millimeter prime lens made out of their cheap glass. And I think I paid only about $325 or $350 for it. It was cheap, cheap, cheap. And at a reception, dark hall, dark room, candlelight, doing table shots at a reception with just the light coming from the candles and the dim room lights with that lens, and they looked fantastic. So yeah, I do have a couple of prime lenses, but zoom is your day-to-day workhorse. What lenses do I use or recommend? I've mentioned them already for the most part. My first choice, general purpose, 24 to 70 2.8, available on both Canon and Nikon. My favorite lens of all time is without a doubt the 70 to 200 f2.8 image stabilized lens. I did mention that EFS Canon lens and whatever Nikon's equivalent designation is, ultra wide angle 10 to 22 millimeter lens, and these lenses will not work on a full frame body. They are designed to work on APS-C sensors only. Then I mentioned a super fast lens, f1.4, f1.2 prime lens. Yeah, it wasn't an f1.8, sorry, it was a 1.4, 50 millimeter prime. You put that on an APS-C sensor, you have a 75 millimeter f1.4, and that's just a wonderful place to be. Camera bodies, the three that I hung around my neck, although the versions changed over the years: Canon 5D Mark II with the 24 to 70, Canon 50D with the 70 to 200, and a 50D with the 10 to 22. I do believe in lens shades being used at all times on all lenses, even in the studio. And the number one reason is the difference between image forming light and non-image forming light. I see people running around without lens shades on all the time. Makes me want to bang my head. The graphic attempts to talk about why this is an important difference. So you have a real object. Let's say that real object is a tree standing in the middle of a park. Light hits the tree and bounces off in every direction under the sun. No pun intended. So it approaches your camera. Some of it will hit the main image area of your lens and form an image on the sensor, the virtual image. Some of it will bounce off other objects. So the light emitting from a tree bounces off another tree and then back into your lens, but it comes in at a very acute angle. So what happens is really we have the image forming light and the non-image forming light coming towards the camera. The lens hood cuts down on the non-image forming light and allows for clearer, cleaner, contrastier looking, snappier looking images, which we then dumb down in post-production, but that's a story for another day. So yeah, use a lens shade. You can dumb down an image, you just can't smarten one up. You know what I mean? Flash, yep. Dedicated flash, fine. Better than ever. I was frustrated with most of these flashes for a good part of my digital career because they never did what I wanted them to do. Ironically, an older model Canon flash, the Canon 550, which was released in like 2003, turned out to be the best one I ever used, so they discontinued it. And I had to buy them off eBay for a while. But now they've come full circle. Canon has released their 600 series, which finally addresses most of my concerns with speedlight flash. I believe Canon or Nikon has one as well. One of the things that they've done is they've added radio transmitters to them instead of infrared, which was insane right from the beginning. I guess it was cheap, but they're finally getting past that little thing, and now I can love them. I actually used to take, although I did use speedlights, obviously, for portability, I actually used to take studio lights with me in case I ever needed some serious flash lighting to do. You can use these lights now to form complex lighting systems. You really have to be careful. I know there's a lot of photographers talking about this, and that's fine if you've got a good, strong location business where you need the portability. You're out in the field, you can't get to AC outlets, or you don't want to bring the appropriate power packs with you. Then it makes a lot of sense to look at that. Generally, for most cases, having multiple flash heads like this can be very expensive, far more expensive even than studio flash, which quite frankly outperforms speedlights in just about every measurable way. So it's really going to depend on the kind of business that you have or where you want to grow your business into. Other flash items. Well, this was from a seminar. Keith, I think you might have been at this one. This was a Warren Noyce seminar that Photography Schoolhouse put on in Arizona. So here we're using portable flash, and because Warren was teaching, and Warren was a Canon shooter, his fiance was holding a Canon flash inside that little softbox on a transmitter, so it's wireless. And then they did have another flash available for those that were shooting Nikon, so they could get a similar look. They just didn't have a flash softbox for it. So you could trigger, even though in the days of infrared triggers, this was very hard to do in daylight because infrared was line of sight. That's why I like these new wireless or these new radio ones with a built-in radio, that because you know they could be behind the camera and they still flash. So if you want to use, if you don't have that kind of flash, invest in pocket wizards or radio poppers or something, but get out of the idea of using infrared and into the idea of using wireless as soon as you can. Now, I recognize that guy holding the reflector, I believe. This also was at that same seminar in Phoenix. Warren Noyce was the host. I was supposed to be there and wasn't due to some border crossing issues, unfortunately. And but reflectors are a very handy tool for just about every shoot. Even in the studio, even under studio flash, I'm still using reflectors. I use them extensively on location in the studio. Best thing ever invented. The one that Keith is holding is actually one of my favorites when I'm out on location, because if I don't have an assistant, I can grab that by the handle and shoot with one hand and maneuver the reflector with the other. It's a bit of a technique, but you can get her done. Using what you see is the reflective silver side on the reflector that's facing the camera that took this image. And that is what I use 90% of the time. You're outside in bright sunlight, you need to fill in some harsh shadows. You don't have an assistant, or your second shooter's off doing something else, you get it done. Very important things that you just can't let go wrong. You got to have a backup for everything. Everything. You're a professional, not an amateur, which means you have to have equipment in case of equipment failures. If a camera fails, you need a camera. If a flash fails, you need a flash. You need enough batteries to get you through 2 weddings, never mind 1. There should never be an excuse for running out of battery power for your camera or your flash. And if you're too cheap to buy a second battery, then stop what you're doing, save your money, buy a second battery, then resume your wedding career. Same thing with flashcards. Drives me insane. Flashcards are so cheap today, it's unbelievable. When I first started out, I paid up to as much as $500 for a flashcard. They were expensive, and I had a lot of them because there was no way, as a professional paid photographer, I was ever going to go to a bride and say, sorry, I'm out of flashcards, I have to stop shooting now. Or I can't grab that nice shot of your grandparents dancing because my batteries are charging in the wall over there. These are just things that your paying customer should never have to hear from you. Lens wipes, keeping your lens clear. Put a filter on front of your lens, absolutely, a good quality filter, or put a crap piece of filter if you don't mind spending $2,000 for a lens and $20 for a filter. Put a good quality filter on your lens, keep them clean. Battery chargers, just in case. Tripod, absolutely. Cables for anything that might break. Yeah, and as Keith said, even cold weather is even worse. Batteries' life declines the colder the temperature is. So kind of at our peak, I don't do this anymore, but in Arizona, at our peak, we would shoot sometimes, quite often would shoot 3 weddings, sometimes 4 or even 5 weddings on a weekend. We had 2 crews. So we'd have a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, a lot. That was a pretty common weekend for us. And we'd have occasionally 2 Saturdays with our second crew and 2 Sundays with our second crew. So my rule of thumb to all of my associate photographers and all of my second shooters was you would better have enough flashcards and enough batteries to get you through 2 weddings, because we're shooting 4 weddings this weekend. In my camera bag, I like the soft camera bags, not the hard ones. Large enough to hold everything that you need. And everything has a special place. Everything belongs somewhere. Because when you're on location and things are flying and you're going 100 miles an hour, it is so easy to leave something behind. With my camera bags, everything has a place. It belongs in that place. And if I look at it and there's a hole where something should be, I know to look around. I remember once going into a church in Phoenix, downtown Phoenix, finding a this was back in the days of film, finding a Bronica 220 film back and a lens sitting on a pew of a church from the wedding that had just left. And we were on our way in for the next wedding. Fortunately for the photographer that left this equipment behind, I knew him. I had his cell phone number. I said, dude, you left this stuff behind at the church. Now, that was kind of freaky. Chances are I wouldn't have known the photographer, and it is that easy to leave something behind, and then you're just kicking yourself. So we shoot in Arizona. What do? We wear a hat. Sunscreen, same reason. Antacid, you know what that's for. Advil or Aleve or whatever your favorite pain medication is. You can't afford to have a headache take you offline, or a sore back or whatever. Used to be a time when customers would try and shove food down our throats. We saw that disappear in later years, and sometimes you just darn well get hungry, but you can't stop. you're in the middle of something, it's happening, you got to take pictures of it, you're feeling faint or feeling a little bit nauseated, grab a candy bar. We used to keep zone bars in our camera bags. We could grab a candy bar, fast energy, and keep going. And we always took with us a cooler with a bottled water, soft drinks, whatever we needed, was always in the trunk of the car, because if we were shooting in some location where we couldn't get beverages, again, shooting in Arizona, you can dehydrate pretty darn quickly. So no alcohol, ever, ever. I don't care. You're a professional, you're on the job, you don't drink on the job. Nobody drinks on the job, and photographers don't drink on the job, no matter how much your customers, the bride's dad, wants to give you a beer, politely decline. Now, you wouldn't think I'd have to say that, but I did hire an assistant at one point in time who believed that it was his God-given right to consume as much alcohol, as much of the customer's alcohol as he possibly could. No. I mean, who would think that in today's day and age? We cannot fail. I've often said that wedding photography is in many ways, one of the toughest kinds of photography that there is. You can't fail. Now, if a commercial photographer fails at a shoot of a donut, it would be embarrassing. He might even lose a client over it, but he can get another donut and he can take a picture of it, or another car, or hire another model, or whatever he needs to do. You can't recreate the wedding. You've got one chance to get it right, and that's it. So you're carrying a pretty heavy-duty load. You cannot fail. There are no excuses. There are no reasons. Nothing can go wrong. If we fail, we both ruin somebody's wedding photos, but open ourselves to liability, both actual and punitive damages you can be charged with. You have to be able to show due diligence in the execution of your job from a legal standpoint. So if something does go wrong, and I have known photographers that have been taken to court. Fortunately, in my career, I was able to avoid that. But I know two of my personal friends that have been friends for like 30 years got taken to court. You have to be able to prove, if something did go wrong, you have to be able to prove that you took every reasonable precaution to make sure that it didn't go wrong. You have to show due diligence. If you didn't get something done because you forgot something at home, you're screwed. You just have to be protected legally. And in at least one of those cases, the photographer was taken to court simply because the bride's brother was going for his law degree and needed trial experience. There was nothing wrong with the wedding. They just wanted to see what they could get away with. I did have a customer like that once, who long after the wedding started complaining, and I don't want to get into it because my blood pressure shoots up every time I think about it, and was threatening legal action, and there was nothing wrong. We had done nothing wrong. I knew that, and this was extortion. Turns out, I found out later, he was trying to sue every single one of the vendors, the DJ, the cake people, the reception. He was trying to sue. He just went out to sue everybody and get all his money back, or even make some. And I still remember, and will probably always remember, that last conversation. Well, I said, well, you know what? Fine. Take me to court. The courts are for both of us. I'll see you there. And that was the last I ever heard from him. Carry insurance against theft, damage, public liability, errors and omissions. Errors and omissions are the punitive thing that you can get. That can be very, very punitive. Although damage and public liability, if you drop a camera lens on somebody's head and crack their skull, yeah. So yes, don't put it off to a rainy day. Get some insurance. PPA has a great insurance program. Call your local insurance agency, see what they say. It's going to cost you some money. I do it for everything. I just booked a little promotional gig today, believe it or not, with a Harley Davidson dealership. We're going to do an event in their store. I phoned up my insurance company and say, I need a $2 million public liability binder, rider, whatever. And he just writes it up. Doesn't cost me anything. It's just a service they provide with my basic policy. So being able to do that and protect myself on promotional events, trade shows, you name it, I've got it. So should you. So, okay, that's kind of setting the stage. You talked about the kind of equipment you want. Full frame sensors, sub full frame, get them both if you can possibly afford that. Get the best quality lenses you can afford. Get Canon, get Nikon, get whatever you want. I don't care about brand. And get insurance. So if you're starting, you want to see me on a Harley. Well, I've often had that little dream. In this case, it is going to be 50 hotties on a Harley for a promotion for Harley Davidson, or at least the dealer. I don't know if it's Harley corporate, but at least it's the dealer. So, 50 hotties, that's pretty hard to take. But I'll do it. I'll find a way through. So we've set up this page, pshtoday.com, which is, I'm going to post the recordings. So this one will go up in a few days. And as we go through all 10 steps, you'll be able to go back to that link, watch the current step that we're on, and then watch the previous steps if you want to go back and review anything. So that'll be, just always remember pshtoday.com and you'll have us. Some special offers for you. There is a companion book, Pro Weddings, Getting Started in Professional Wedding Photography. It's a 140-page manual on how to get started. It's a companion to this. It comes with not only the book, but you get 4 videos and you get posing guides and you get a truckload of stuff. It's normally $149.95. We are giving a webinar school discount of about 50%, $79.77. If you go to pshsale.com, it'll say $149.95, but it's hooked up. When you use the Buy Now button, it'll put the sale through at $79.77. So if you're really serious about doing this, you want, it's got sample contracts, it's got my actual contracts and sales forms that I use, which you're free to copy. I don't guarantee, because legalities change jurisdiction to jurisdiction, so I can't guarantee that it's going to be legally binding in your area, but it's a good starting point. You can take it to a lawyer and say, here, does this work? Am I amply protected? As well as the posing guides and shot guides and everything else. So if you want that, it's available. Go to pshsale.com. Some people are still asking. We did a series just a few weeks ago on Boudoir, and some people are still asking about the Boudoir Posing and Idea Guide. So we put that back in here too. Not that it has anything to do with wedding photography, although wedding boudoir is a whole thing itself. More on that later. It's normally $77.77. You can save $30, pick it up for $47.77. Go to pshnow.com, but you have to use that promo code. I'll leave this up for a minute so you can mark down that promo code, and it's case sensitive, just to make life nasty. So with that, I want to just open it up to any last minute questions. We're going to wrap it up for tonight. We'll be back again next Monday night with part 2 of this. This was mostly intro and setting the stage. Next week, we're going to start getting into more about creating sample images when you don't have any. So if there's any last minute questions, by all means, jump in, put them in the chat window. You have to be on the pshtoday.now.com page, pshtoday.com page, to see the chat window, and just ask your questions in there. In the meantime, copy down that promo code if you're interested in still picking up that Boudoir posing an idea guide. So with that, folks, thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed it, and hope to see you again next week, next Monday, same time, same place. Have a great night, everybody. Come get me, Mom, I'm through.